I want to talk about Europe. I want to talk about America. I want to talk about Ukraine. I want to talk about Russia. And most of all, I want to talk about Daddy. You've probably seen that there has been a NATO conference at The Hague recently where everyone showed up and they clapped. NATO is the military alliance between these European countries and America. You know, they've been on the rocks lately because Trump has been not as supportive of NATO as previous American administrations. So they all met to hash out their differences and figure out the future of NATO. And while at this event, Mark Rutte, who is the Secretary General of NATO and Prime Minister of the Netherlands, did something that you might consider a little bit embarrassing.
They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes, then it's easy to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while you have to use a certain word.
I think we have to join the others.
Yes.
He called Trump Daddy and said that Daddy sometimes has to use strong language, talking about how Trump handled Israel and Iran, which is wild. It's a wild thing to do. You know, this got me thinking, first of all, why would a human behave in that way? A human who's achieved a lot of success in his own life. I mean, he's Secretary General of NATO, and why is he behaving in this way? And so I wanted to sort of paint just a broad picture of what the reality is on the ground with regards to NATO and US and Europe relations, okay? But just to follow up on this particular daddy line for a bit, Trump loved it. Trump loved being called daddy. In fact, when asked about it, he put some words in Mark's mouth.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
I don't think he said, "You're my daddy," Trump. I don't remember him saying, "You're my daddy." And then the idea that's like, if he doesn't do what I say, I'll hit him hard. You know, this relationship between US and Europe is way more obviously transactional, kinky under Trump than it was before. It feels different. He also followed it up by putting out a music video.
I just want to get your attention. Daddy's home.
That's from the official White House account. The reason this is happening is kind of multifaceted. I remarked when we first saw this live that what Mark Rutte was doing in this conversation, really sycophantically glazing Trump. We're like, "Oh, you're so great. Oh, you're so strong." Reminded me very much of like Grimo Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings. He's clearly got a goal in mind. He's got an angle. Why is he doing? What does he want to get out of it? First, let's rewind. Right after the Cold War, let's say like 92, 93, early 90s, Europe actually did spend a good chunk of money on their own defense. For example, in 1992, Germany had 3,200 of these troop carrier / tank things, these infantry mobilization vehicles or whatever. In 2025, they have 680. In 1992, these howitzers, artillery weapons, Germany had 3,180. Now they have 109. Over the past, let's say, 30 years, most countries in Europe have cut back spending on the military and use it to spend on social services, social safety nets, programs for regular people, whatever. They've spent less in the military and more on society, which has allowed Germany to have, Europe to have things other countries don't have, like more universal health care and things like that. This has been the trade-off. Because of that, in the past 30 years, they've relied more and more on America for defense. And so America has had a lot of pull over NATO. Basically, in the past 30 years, if America wanted something to happen with NATO, it happened. They were pretty much able to have heavy influence over it, and it gave them a lot of soft power over Europe. Trump doesn't like that deal. Trump has come in and said, "This deal sucks, and I would like Europe to pay more into NATO. If we're going to spend this % of our GDP, they're going to spend this % of GDP." He doesn't like the deal that it was before. Now, on its surface, you could say maybe that makes sense. Maybe Trump would like to cut American military spending so he can spend it on other things like Europe had, like healthcare and education, foreign aid, etc. The problem is, first of all, he's not doing that. He's actually increasing military spending while still demanding that Europe pays more and loses our soft power. I have a problem with that in general, but okay, I can see it. He wants them to spend more money. To be honest, with the situation being what it is right now, Europe still has to listen. With the threat of Russia, with their lack of influence in the Middle East over two key canals that put a lot to Europe, they still have to listen. And so what is going on here is that Europe is agreeing to Trump's demands while planning how to get out from under his thumb behind the scenes. Because Trump would like Europe to all spend 5% of their GDP on defense, which is a huge increase. And he wants them to buy more guns, tanks, and planes. By the way, my dad flew one of these planes. I lived on a NATO base in Germany. My dad flew one of these AWACS planes. They're radar planes. Kind of cool. But ideally, in Trump's world, all of this money is going to American guns, American tanks, American planes. And that American companies will thrive on this. They'll spend more money. He'll keep all the influence. But obviously, that's not how it works. There's trade-offs. While NATO did agree, and Mark Rutte just kissed the ring. I mean, he just basically said, Daddy, you're great. What a great plan. You're helping out. What they're trying to do is move outside of that behind the scene. Like up front, be like, oh yes, good sir, Daddy, yes sir. But then behind the scenes, change things. And I want to like give a specific example. The first and most obvious way is that Europe is very quickly trying to accelerate not just the amount they're spending on the military as part of this deal, but who they're spending on it with. So instead of buying American guns, American tanks, American planes, European defense stocks are rising very quickly. This is Europe Aerospace and Defense ETF from the last year, up 70%. Germany's trying to build its own weapons, aircraft, tank facilities. The goal, in the short term, they'll probably buy more American military stuff, but the long term is to build their own defense sales industry that they can then buy from. That's the idea. And then the second thing is they're being bullied not only on NATO, but on trade. Trump is trying to throw around tariffs on all countries in the world, but especially on Europe, in order to get what he wants. And I have been watching this story closely, and as I've mentioned in previous videos, that's not without cost. People are rational actors, not all the time, but in some ways. And if you are pressuring them over and over on an area, they're going to try to find a way to get out of that pressure. And so what's going on is, this was announced very recently. EU leaders are trying right now to create a new trade bloc with Asia Pacific to basically make a WTO of their own. It's a group chat without the United States. They're trying this right now. Like, this is already starting to be floated to get enough economic power to eventually say, F you. So right now they're playing ball is what I'm saying. Europe is playing ball and they're doing, I think, very old Machiavellian style of just saying whatever the guy wants to hear. But the actions show something different. The actions show building their own defense industry to not require America and to try to build a new trading bloc, possibly with Canada too, to cut US out of the picture. And I think this needs to be understood from a game theory perspective when you say like, oh, this looks like it's going well. Like if you're somebody who sees this daddy's home stuff and thinks, wow, we're just making Europe kiss the ring. That's one way to look at it. It is embarrassing that Mark Rutte did this. I do think it is embarrassing that he's talking like this. But I just want you to know, like, it's not as short term as it looks. It clearly is part of a larger strategy of telling this guy what he wants to hear in order to eventually not have to rely on America. All this to be said, NATO spending probably needed to increase anyway because of the threat of Russia, especially if Trump's going to pull back. So I want to talk about two things additionally after that. First is that not every European country agreed. All of them did but one. One country did not sign this deal, España. Every NATO country but one said they were going to do the 5% deal. And it's going to be tough for them to pay. I want you to be clear that, like, even if they are spending it on European defense stocks, it's going to be difficult for Europe to get used to the idea of 5% of GDP, which is billions and billions of euros being spent on defense when they used to have that for social. It's like they have the money just sitting around. They're going to take on debt to afford it. There may come with some costs. And that's why Spain said no, they're just not going to pay it, which caused Trump to lash out.
A question on Spain. Are you satisfied with today?
Oh, I think Spain's terrible what they've done. No, I do. They're the only country that won't pay the full up. They want to stay at 2%. I think it's terrible. And, you know, they're doing very well. The economy is very well. And that economy could be blown right out of the water with something bad happening.
So I want you to really pay attention to what he said there. I mean, which is why Europe is doing this. He's talking like a mafia boss. He's talking like the guys that offer protection. It's a threat. Like, he's clearly constantly throwing around the ability to hurt you on trade, very thinly veiled, in an attempt to get what he wants. The idea that sovereign nations in a large economic bloc like this aren't going to try to get around that is, I think, a silly one. I just want to reiterate sort of a larger theme I've had, which is like all the stuff Trump's doing seems so short term. It seems designed to use the power we have now to get a few short-term concessions at the cost of long-term alliances. And it's proving to be unpopular. On all these fronts, Americans are slowly but surely approving less and less. Specifically on the three worst things, which is trade, economy, and Israel-Iran war. I don't think it's worth the cost, is what I'm saying. Even if I do agree that maybe there's a world where we do spend less on military and other parts of NATO spend more. Like, I think he's got some kind of point there. Maybe that would be better for the world if the US cut back on some spending and NATO put in more and it was more equal. I actually don't think that's that crazy, but that's just not what's happening. By the way, if you're a European nation and you're trying to save some money so that you can spend more on the military, one thing you might consider is Rocket Money. The money app that works for you. Maybe Germany has a lot of subscriptions they need to cancel. Maybe they're still paying for a gym membership they don't use. Maybe France has 2 copies of Netflix or Disney Plus they're not using, okay? You can cancel that. You can actually put your bank account information in, see every reoccurring charge that you're getting, and one-click cancel it right from the app. Additionally, saving up for tanks and planes and guns is hard work. Perhaps you'd consider a budgeting app. Rocket Money has an incredible budgeting feature that lets you track your monthly income and your spending and save up for certain key things, like I'm doing for an upcoming trip to China. Thank you again, Rocket Money, for sponsoring Big A Clips. I've used it for a long time. It's very helpful. I'd like you to check it out. However, back to the content. The reason Europe is interested in this in the first place is because of the threat of Russia, because Putin is watching. The idea that Europe needs to be more militarized is because they don't want to have Putin on their border as a military threat. And so I wanted to follow up on that because I've become more and more interested in the economic side of the Russia-Ukraine war. And I want to give a little update on something I thought went under the radar. There's few people in Putin's Russia that can openly criticize him. Almost none. If you don't want to fall out of a window, you cannot say something bad about Putin or the way he's running the country or anything. However, there's at least one person who still has the capability to stand up and say truth to power. And it's this woman, Elvira Nabiullina. She's Russia's Jerome Powell. She is the head of Russia's central bank, and she has to be honest about certain things in the economy. He can't afford to lose his central banker because when you have a leader punish central banker, it reduces your ability to borrow money. So the central banker has some authority. It's why Trump can't fire Jerome Powell. He has to wait out his full term. The central bankers have a certain level of safety that comes from the fact that the leader will be hurt economically if they punish them. Elvira Nabiullina had a press conference recently where she said stuff that might really shock you, that anyone could say it in Russia. She basically openly went through the numbers and said the war-fueled economy of Russia is running on empty. She said this has finally caught up to us and it's bad. She basically said that the party is over. This was only a few days ago. And she went in quite specific detail, and I want to go through some of it right now, without being too boring. Basically, when the war started in 2021, Russia had built up a pretty healthy national wealth fund. They had a lot of money in a lot of different currencies saved up to help spend and prop up the economy. That has drained to like a third of what it was. It's down to almost nothing. And because of all the sanctions and being cut out of the SWIFT payment systems, Russia is now holding instead of like they used to have Euro, USD, gold, now they only have Chinese yuan. They have like $150 billion worth of Chinese yuan, and that's it. Additionally, their gold reserves, which were really massive when the war started, have now been completely burned through. They had 400 tons of gold at the beginning of the war. They're down to 140. Now, she says openly, at the pace we're going, this will be depleted in 1 year and will be empty. It's worth noting that they're getting to the end of the rope on the ability to sort of just spend, and borrow to support a war effort that is not growing the economy. Additionally, this guy, the economy minister of Russia, came out and said another open, uncomfortable fact. He said straight up, our country's on the brink of recession. This worked fine for a few years, but the lag effects have now caught up with us. We are now in serious trouble. Putin Putin, of course, insists everything's fine. But his own officials, and these people that would never dare contradict him, are saying otherwise. Like, everyone other than Putin is saying, like, hey, we have a serious problem here. It just makes rational sense, right? I'm not saying Ukraine's economy is good at all either. They're both in a bad spot. But Russia's ability to continually finance these debts and continually borrow is really running low as the war drags on. And there's a question that comes up at this point, which is like, why? Like, what is Putin still fighting for? The most he's gonna get, it seems at this point, is like a few more kilometers or a better deal at the peace table. But at every day this goes on, extreme cost to the economy. The time to be able to still run this war with no trade-offs is over. That was able for the first year. Now the trade-offs are getting more and more drastic. What they'll have to do to keep the war going is either, mandate all Russian banks start buying Russian war bonds, or if there's enough patriotism, they can get Russian citizens to buy them. Ukrainian citizens are buying war bonds. This is just loaning your money to the government for the war. Ukrainian citizens have some patriotism for this. So they are loaning their money to the government to buy war bonds. But Russia hasn't done this yet. And it seems unlikely they'll be able to at the scale that's happening here. I just want to point out that, like, economically, I know people have said similar things before, but it really is seeming like the time for the pressure to be on Russia to end this war is coming due. It's happening now in a way that wasn't before. In fact, I'll fully admit, people said this would be bad for Russia's economy, but in the first year, it really wasn't. In the first year, the military spending actually spurred Russia's economy and it was doing well. It's only now that the lag effects are catching up and it's becoming a real problem. So as we find ourselves in that point, I'm hopeful that maybe we can get towards a real ceasefire, because this is not something that is sustainable. You can, by the way, if you're interested, buy Ukrainian war bonds and you can get a huge return, but just to be clear, there's a good chance they don't pay them back. You can get like 25% return on Ukrainian war bonds, but it's very risky. If they lose the war, you don't get paid back at all. And if they do win, they might default. It's a bit of a gamble. So I don't know. Ukrainian citizens are doing it, but you might not be able to. I just want you to understand that, like, the age-old relationship between the United States and Europe and their stance towards Russia is changing very dramatically, very quickly because of Trump's actions. And the way it's going to play out, I think, is not what any of them expect. By the way, one more thing. From Putin's POV, he kind of hoped that I think NATO would fall apart. It's not. NATO is, if anything, I guess, stronger than ever. They're all spending more money than ever. NATO is probably at its max strength since 92, and he is dealing with no real gains in Ukraine and a failing economy. So it's not working out the way he hoped either. Just wanted you guys to know, wanted you guys to talk about it. I think it's very interesting. I'm going to keep following up on it. Something I've been fascinated with lately. But I just wanted to give you an update on why the daddy's home stuff kind of meant more than just a simple joke or a misspeak.